Now, beyond what we're doing with the hair, we need to really figure out how to mix up a skin tone. And all skin tones from the sets that we're working with come from brown. Of course, adding a little bit of yellow and even sometimes some orange, maybe some red. So you see I did some yellow, some brown, and some orange here. And I got a lot of water in there, and I'm just taking some of the excess paint off my brush. And I'm on a dry surface here. All right, so I'm just coming in with a dry surface to control that water as it goes around for the base of the skin tone. Now, as I continue, you'll see I'm just taking a little bit of a darker tone now and putting a little bit of the darker tones in around the face. Now, when I start in on the hair, I got to look at the brightest brights, and I'm just going to do some wet and wet techniques to maintain areas of pure white where the highest lights, the highest highlights are. And then I'm going to use a little bit of a wet and wet yellow wash in some of these areas just to kind of start to tint the background. So I'm just putting clean water in on the foot over where the areas of the hair have that pure bright white highlight. All right, so up against the wet and wet, you can see it's going to soften and blend. But on top of the other areas where I have the dry surface, you can see I'm just using a soft, simple brush stroke that follows the contour of the hair. And again, it's really just a pale yellow with a touch of brown. I just have to remember to make sure that those bright, bright highlights in the hair stay white from the white of the paper. Well, as you start in on the light value washes, I'm getting a really nice soft yellow and brown to put in some of the medium, those golden colors that are in the hair. Doing some of the dark underneath the chin, just kind of pull that out. And then I'm putting those lighter, even though they're going to get much darker. I need to slowly build to that dark. As you slowly build, make sure that your brush stroke is going in the direction that the hair is going. All right, you can see from here on out, every stroke that I make with the brush is going to be just that, a stroke that follows the direction of the hair. As I start in on the medium value washes, I'm still using the brown, and the yellow with plenty of water, but not too much water so that it doesn't start to travel all over the surface. Again, the surface is still damp where I have those other light washes. So it's going to create a nice soft edge when I put this in, but with less water, you'll see that it's not going to travel across the surface of the wash that's underneath. So this is a damp surface wash. As the pigment comes off the brush, it's starting to dry up. You see the little split there in the bristles? That's creating a nice textural look called dry brush. That dry brush technique is going to come in handy throughout this entire assignment. As I start in on the first layer of the darker value washes, some of the detail layers, I'm going to start mixing up again to get that darker gold, but I'm not going to use black. I'm still just using the brown and some of the blue to get a darker value. So brown and blue, and then mix that up with a good amount, not too much, but a good amount of water, so you have a nice dark value. As soon as you make that first mark, you'll be able to see if it's dark enough or if there's too much water in it. So you can see the mark that I'm making. It's a little bit darker, it's nice and controlled because I don't have too much water in the brush. And I'm using a round brush now so I can control some of those sharp ends where there has some of those darker values. Now that some of the details are a little bit drier, I'm coming in and using this glazing technique where I have a really strong amount of yellow on my brush. And I'm trying to really punch up some of those highlights. You can see it's almost like an opaque layer, but it still has enough water in it to maintain some of the transparency. As I work into the darker value washes, the second layer, now I'm really trying to set those deep, darker values in the hair texture with a darker brush stroke. So I'm really controlling now I'm using the round brush so I can use the sharp point, but also as I add pressure to the brush, I can create a wider area of pigment on the paper. So I'm using this brush. You can see I've got the brown and the blue, a little bit less water now, so it's a little bit more concentrated pigment. And I'm trying to just slowly build those darks in the textures of the hair. As I start to work into the shirt here, she's wearing a white shirt, but it's reflecting some of the blue from the background. So I'm just going to use the wet and wet technique and just kind of pull some of the blue reflections in around the shirt so that it still maintains the brightness of the white, but it has some of the hints of the blue in the background. With the curly hair, I'm going to use a slightly wider flat brush so that I can cover more ground and at the same time get some of the curly look. Since it's mostly dark, there's a few highlights in there, I can get a lot more and cover more ground. So what I did was I just got some brown and some red. So I mixed up some brown and red to get that nice medium value, maybe a little bit of a blue in there just to darken it up just a touch. As I put in these darker layers of wash here, I'm going back in and I'm using a little bit more of the brown, a little bit more of the blue, a touch of red, and less water. So I get that nice, deep, dark, richer, cleaner, more controlled pigment as I'm coming down around and putting in some of the dark areas. What I noticed when all those areas of texture dried is that it got very dark and I lost some of the highlights that I needed. So what I'm doing is just taking a square brush, flat, and I'm lifting. So I just have clean water on the brush and my paper towel, and I'm just coming back in and I'm lifting out some of the color on top so I can kind of basically just create some areas of highlight. The base color here on the skin tone has a very yellow slash tan appearance. So I'm going to go in with a wet and wet wash. And I do need to also take the clean water up into the part, right? Because you can see the lightness coming from the part between the two parts of the hair. So all this with the clean water, and then I'm going to mix up a pale yellow and a pale brown wash. In the wash too, I just added a dot of red to get a little bit of warmth, a little bit more warmth, and then of course some more yellow into the brown to try to get a good match. So again, I'm taking that up from where the hair is parted, and I'm going over the entire skin area with a wet in wet technique. And with a little movie magic, I was able to go back in, and you can see I used the brown and the blue again. And again, I'm using that, I used the flat brush on the hair, and I just built the layers over top. Just built the layers from medium washes into slightly darker washes, and now I'm just working on the detailing around the eyes.